Welcome to the afternoon keynote. We're very honored to have Martin Przewloka from SAP Walldorf here to give a presentation this afternoon. I'll start by briefly introducing the speaker. Can you just tell us a bit about your background, where you're educated, and what your work experience is apart from SAP?
Okay. Thank you very much for having the chance to talk to you. So just briefly, from my academic background is two-folded or even three-folded. Studied physics and later on economics and finally also medicine. Don't be surprised, never worked in medicine, but it was just for curiosity. So mainly I'm coming from physics. I'm a high technology guy, let's call it like this. I worked for many years at CERN in Geneva, so this very famous research institute. But then later on I decided to go to SAP because SAP was this kind of business company bringing technology and business processes together, and there I could ideally or perfectly combine the economical side with the technology side. But I had to forget a bit about hardcore physics, unfortunately. This is gone. Okay, so that's about me in a few minutes.
Okay, it's a very interesting topic about disruptive technologies. I'll hand over to you so you can enlighten us. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, again, thank you. What I want to do is I want to give you really a high-level overview about new consumer-based solutions in context with something what we call the business web. I will not do any kind of deep dive regarding technology. I will not talk about censoring or something like this. Even this is also part of our, in certain areas, part of our activities. But I think I can build something like a logical bracket above the topics what you are discussing here as part of the conference. Even it's video coding, or it's censoring, or it's areas what I thought was on the agenda in the area of health and things like that. So I'm talking more about business model disruption. Again, it's very high level due to time constraints, but I can promise it's maybe in some areas even a bit entertaining, surprising, and maybe the biggest surprise will be finally for you that you have never seen SAP in such an area, because SAP is from the background and from the history, of course, a company who's targeting business customers. So what I want to do is I want to quickly introduce SAP, just a few words about SAP, that this is important again for context building. Then I will talk briefly about SAP research, how is SAP research organized, and then I will talk a bit about what I call global challenges and the role of IT. I just have chosen a few areas. All these areas are areas I'm responsible for in SAP research. It's not the complete list, it's just a few highlights, but I think based on those, based on these areas, I can perfectly explain what business model innovation or disruption means, and then finally I'll talk a bit about the concept of the business web. And I will always give you realistic examples, so that's not too dry. So SAP is the world's leading provider of business applications, so I think everybody should know SAP. Pretty huge company, so we are roughly 60,000 employees, and we have a strong focus on development, but we are mainly coming, that's the reason why I'm using this slide, we are mainly coming from the business applications area. So our first customers, majority or large amount of our customers are really big customers, big enterprises, and so far consumers were not our focus area. But what we are doing right now, since 2 years, we have renovated and we have re-articulated our strategy. And our strategy now is significantly expanded. It goes beyond the application, so we are coming from applications, but what we are doing right now is what we call it the 5 pillars, the 5 markets. We are extremely strong now as well in the area of analytics, in the area of mobile, in the area of database. Maybe you heard about HANA, the in-memory database technology, which was mainly developed also as part of SAP, and then of course we enter also the area of cloud business applications in the cloud. So here you see already, or you can see already, that we significantly expand our strategy. Again, we are coming from the business application side, so now we have significantly expanded by entering these so-called 5 markets. It's also maybe very interesting to see a few numbers. What I want to highlight here is the significant amount of spendings we currently have in the area of F&E, so in the area of research and development. F&E is not just purely research, so which is roughly 10% of our revenue, and the number of employees, so this is still 2010 figures, so it's roughly 60,000 people who are working for SAP. So now let's jump to research. So why is research now so important? Because SAP is coming, as I mentioned now several times, is coming from the business application side, and we have to find and we have to enter new markets. And one of the key areas or key objectives we currently have in research is to have a 3 to 5 years look ahead and to develop and to investigate new business opportunities for SAP, which is along future trends, future IT trends, future business trends. But it's very important to understand our focus is not 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. Even you can see here there's something written with 10 years. Our main focus is to investigate or to develop solutions which can be on the market in 3 to 5 years. There's a few exceptions where we stretch this timeline a bit further. That's the reason why you can see here 10 years. In the main technology part, again, databases, something like this, we have also a focus of 10 years. But everything what I'm showcasing to you now in a few minutes, this is something that you will see in 3 years, up to 5 years on the market. Also a few figures. This is now pure research. Pure research is roughly 700 employees plus partners. Not a single project what we are running in research is an isolated SAP project. All of them are together with partners from academia, partners from the industry, even customers are involved, and we are pretty global. We have 19 locations in research, so we are not doing research on an island or in a single location, so it's widespread, as you can see here on the map. So we have research locations more or less everywhere. What we also do is something like a center of gravity concept. So in certain areas we have specific competencies. For example, just pick out a few ones. If you take Singapore, for example, which is a new research location, here we're focusing on logistics and business processes in the area of logistics. If you take Dublin, for example, Belfast, here we are doing research in the area of hardware and databases, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a very impressive picture because it's very important to have this kind of network, and the network is not just within the research organization only. The network is going beyond, going to customers, going to universities, and to partners. Having said this, I'd like to stress also a bit what are we doing, or what is the main focus of our research activities. And this is threefold. What we are doing is, I start with the middle part of the slide. We are doing research in the area of technology. So one huge challenge, and this is a challenge which is more or less combined with every topic you will see in a few minutes, is, for example, security. It's data security. So this is a very strong research area we have to focus on. We have to focus on big data. I will also give you a few examples about big data, and so on and so forth. So that's technology-driven things. And here we are really doing, partially in parts, this kind of deep dive research, IT-related research. But very important is whatever we do in the area of technology, it doesn't make sense if we don't think enough about strategy, new business processes, new business models. And this can be very disruptive, and especially for SAP, and that's the reason why I give you a few examples. And if we are starting a new research project, we always start from the top. So we always start from the business strategy, from the business process perspective. We are not just doing technology research because it's nice to do it, or it's because we see something on the technology front upcoming. It always has to relate to business. Business opportunities, new business processes, new business models. And the third aspect is, of course, that we consider also talent recruiting. So we are doing also research activities, especially together with universities, to attract new people, new talents, and to finally hire them to work for SAP. And in this context, we divide research mainly into two areas. The first one is this, what we call the research engine. So here you have this a bit more extended time frame, 3 to 5 years, even in some exceptions, as I explained, up to 10 years. So here we are doing research driven by new business processes, but not yet driven with pure commercial numbers, or that we say, okay, this or that is exactly how the product should look like. But as soon as we recognize technology or a prototype that we build in the research engine is mature enough, then we hand over to something what we call the commercialization engine, and then we immediately start to commercialize. So all the areas I'm showing you in a few minutes, all of them are already in the area of commercialization. So we bring them to the market step by step. So they are already past the research engine, and they are now ready to get productized. So now let's start with the examples I have chosen. The number one, or the first example, is about the world population and what's going on that side. So if you, and just a few impressive numbers, if you go back in history, 72, on the Earth, 3.8 billion people were living, and roughly a third of the residents, of the people, were living in cities. If you go further, 2012, so right now, the number of people more or less doubled, 7 billion, and now 50% are living in cities. So you have a trend, a very strong trend in increasing the world's population, and we have a strong trend in, on the side, increasing of the share people are living in cities. But if you go now again further, then it's becoming even more drastic, especially if you look regarding the number below. 70% of the world's population will live in cities in the range of 2050. And the growth rate of the total world's population is not that big anymore. But the growth rate, especially on cities, is extremely huge. So this means it's more or less exactly the opposite of when we started to look back in the 70s. Yeah, so in the 70s, 30% were living in cities. In 2050, 70% are living in the cities. So this has a huge consequence regarding IT and new IT processes. I could easily talk here now an hour about just this slide, and I just give you a few indications. Why is now IT so important, and what do we have to overcome here? So we have problems, of course, in the area of public administration. So how citizens, how consumers / citizens are working together with the government. Of course, we have strong problems and will experience strong problems in the area of utilities. Logistics, so no surprise, transportation, public transportation, trucks, and so on and so forth. And very, very important, the area of security. And security is not just related to crime, security is also related to disasters. And just to give you here the first example, because we have a very strong focus on this area, today it's simply not possible in the case of a disaster, take an earthquake or whatever you take, to orchestrate all the forces. The police, the hospital, it's simply not possible. There's not a single integrated system existing on the earth. So everything is isolated, everything is somehow disconnected, and there's nobody who has the control to organize and to orchestrate all the forces. And it's simply an IT problem. So the forces are there, the sensors are there, the cars are there, everything is there, but it's simply not connected. And there's no IT solution who's bringing things together. So that's one of the areas where we are doing our focus in research, to build solutions who integrate and who allow finally to orchestrate those forces. And the first thing what you have to get is transparency. Before you do and before you decide anything, you simply need transparency. You need a few maps, you need a few indicators where the forces currently are, which streets are blocked and something like this. It sounds so easy, but it's extremely, extremely complicated. So that's one example. And it's very important. It will not just be something what you can solve top-down. So here, for example, you have the first indication why the consumer, why the citizen will become so important. Because the citizen finally will also, in such a case, will be a person who delivers data, who owns data. And he will be part of this game. He will not be isolated, he will not just be controlled or something like this. He will feed the system. And this is how I think integration has to happen. Next example, the area of energy. Sounds also very simple, and energy, especially the ones who are coming from Germany or from Europe, they pretty know. So there's big discussion ongoing, especially in Germany, regarding the so-called Energiewende, so the energy topic. So there's four areas. There's production, there's transportation, the cables, there's consumption, and there's storage. So seems to be is not relevant to consumers or to citizens or to whom else, but it's exactly the opposite. So take for a second, forget for a second transportation. Production is consumer related because some people own already solar cells, or some people are contributing to the production. Consumption for sure is consumer related, and even storage will become consumer related. Take an electro car, take an e-car, which consists of a big battery. The battery is used finally for driving the car, but the battery finally can later stabilize the grid. So you can feed back energy to the grid. So the consumer is not just a consumer anymore. The consumer is both ways, consumer and a provider, as he is a prosumer. And again, this is just a question of IT. You need IT solutions, you need new business processes, new business solutions to support. You can also explain this in this kind of 3x3 matrix design. Yeah, so you have the physical assets, but all the rest, technical IT, the business platform, even its large, medium, and small, is highly IT related. Yeah, so of course you have the sensors and all that stuff, the cables on the physical asset side, but all the rest is mainly driven or can be mainly organized or orchestrated by intelligent IT. And just to give you a few numbers, sounds also very impressive, just one sentence here. So you can save 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide just if you realize the vision of something what we call smart grids or intelligent networks in the area of electricity. So how does it work, or what's the main difference? And again, this is just one example of many, but in this area we are also very active. So today, energy will be consumed, so there's a nuclear plant, and the nuclear plant is running, is working, and then we are consuming the energy. But in the future, it will be different. It will be exactly, or it can be even the opposite. Yeah? So energy is not there all the time in the same amount. Take solar, take wind, take water, whatever you take. So you have to bring together now the consumer behavior with the producer. And if you don't find a right mapping, and however you steer this kind of mapping, then it's simply not working. And I can easily illustrate this also with a slide like this. You have different entities. Some are consuming, some are producing, depending on the weather, depending on the situation. But now you have to orchestrate this. And it's not just that you have to orchestrate from the pure technology perspective, you also have to orchestrate from the business perspective. Yeah, so this means if a consumer is for the moment consuming, or if a consumer is in the next moment producing energy and bringing energy back to the grid, then somehow this relates also to his final bill. Yeah, so he will get charged on the one side, but on the other side he also wants to get a kind of reimbursement if he's supporting the grid. So therefore, we have to think from the business perspective about many areas. Just a few ones: the shift of loads, dynamic tariffs, forecasts, accounting, clearing, contracting, all those areas. And it's completely not yet there. So there's no one in the world right now who owns a solution, who is able to provide an integrated solution, who is able to manage those scenarios. Even it's so simple to describe. So I just give you, also in this context, one concrete example, what we are doing. And the example is quite simple. The sheet is just to illustrate and to make this a bit more fancy, but this is live currently with 1,000 households. And the idea here is that the consumer, now back to the consumer is now planning the energy consumption, which is a completely different model than consumers are living today. So today they switch on the TV or the PC or whatever, whenever they like, but here what they have to do is they have to do a plan. They have to tell the system, however they do it at the moment, they are doing this online with a PC, with a web browser, they have to tell the system, okay, this is my planned consumption. And in this example, my eyes are not that good anymore. I think at 9 p.m. you have to correct, here's better. Or 8 p.m. 8 p.m. At 8 p.m. the consumer is starting or is planning, okay, now so there's more consumption because he wants to use different devices. So that's the plan. The next step now is reality. So consumer is coming at home, switching the light on, and what happens right now, the plan and the actual consumption maybe doesn't fit or doesn't match. Yeah? So it's maybe a bit more, so he's above the consumption. Then he's switching on the TV or whatsoever, he's still above, and then maybe he's doing kind of cooking or whatsoever, so he's below the plan. So finally it ends like this. So why do you have to do this? If you bring together the plan with the real consumption, then the utility provider can make you, for example, a special offer. He can let you run on a different charging plan or on a different tariff plan, and on the other side he can stabilize the network, the smart grid, and so on and so forth. So it can be a financial reason why you're doing this, it can be other reasons, it can be environmental stuff, whatever drives you, but it's the question is it possible, and that's what we right now test in the field with 1,000 households, is it possible to plan energy consumption and to stick to the plan, or it's simply not possible. So what we expect is after half a year, so we are running this for half a year, what we expect is just a clear answer, is it possible to plan energy consumption? If yes, then we are ready to provide a solution. So this is a smart meter-based solution. So it's quite simple to implement, but we simply don't know if this business model really runs. So that's one concrete example. Now let's jump to the third area, which is about data. If you think about data, then, and especially if you're coming from the business context, a lot of people are thinking about reporting, BI, business intelligence, analytics, and things like that. Reality is, if you go to an enterprise, if you go to a corporate, quite often the reports managers are using, top managers are using, are pre-compiled. There's delivery time of 6 to 8 days or weeks whatsoever. Everything seems to be not integrated. So a real question is, can we do it somehow real time? Can we do it on a daily basis? Or can we do this even on a second basis? So we need integrated systems. So that's the old story if you think about data, and a lot of enterprises investigate to overcome this problem. So that's classic SAP. But if you look again a bit ahead, then you can ask yourself, so where's the data coming from? And this, of course, relates also to a lot of topics you had on the agenda beforehand. So take digital media. A lot of data are coming from digital media, no surprise. But if you go one step further, and if you take surveillance systems to something what is called the digital shadow, then the data amount increases significantly. It's not just doubling the data amount, it will be even 10 times more. So it seems to be surprising, but if I show you now the next thing, then it's even more surprising, because now the real revolution starts, and this starts right now, which is the sensors, the Internet of Things, something what we also call the machine-to-machine communication. And this lets the data explode by another order of magnitude, or by even 1,000 times more data compared to the digital shadow. So now the question is, what can we do with the data? We are simply not able to store the data. Even today, with the digital media data and take pieces of the digital shadow, we are simply not able to store the data. So we have to think now about new business models, new business scenarios, and they have to be benefit for the business, and they have to be of benefit for the consumers and for the customers. Otherwise, it simply doesn't make sense. So, and I give you just one, or even later a few more examples which are also related to data. And one example is what we are doing also in research is we think about also a cloud-based concept which is called the data cloud. And the data cloud is again this game bringing the consumer and the businesses together. So we have primary sources, we have entities who deliver data, and it is mainly structured business data or even consumer data, and we have secondary sources, which is mainly unstructured data, which is data who are publicly available, and so on and so forth. It is social media and stuff like this. So, and here you have another dimension, which is the generation part, which is the above line, and there's the consumption part. So we have to think twofold. We have to think about how do we bring the data together, how do we cleanse the data, how do we harmonize the data, how do we relate the data, the structured with the unstructured data, and then finally what kind of business scenario with value, creating value, we can create out of this. And I give you now once again very simple example. It seems to be so simple, but it's not yet there. And take the area of health. I've chosen health because health was also a topic which was part of the conference. If you take health, then most people immediately start to discuss with me about data security, which is an important topic. But if you forget about data security for a second, and if you then think about the scenario I'm showcasing to you right now, then data security is not an issue. Because if you take, for example, something what we call the pandemic outbreaks scenario, which is quite simple, which always happens every year, everywhere in the world. Take a flu. So a flu appears or shows up somewhere, but nobody knows what's going on now. How is the spread of the flu? Is it just in Frankfurt, or is it now also in Munich, or is it already across Germany or even across Europe? So what's going on? It's just getting information about the situation. So what you simply need is just a mobile device. You have to roll out very simple applications to the consumers, and the consumer simply just enters a few data, not personal data. It has nothing to do with data security. If he feels, for example, unhealthy, we just use a few statistical data, maybe the gender, maybe the age range, or whatever. But if you just take those data, and if you bring now the data into a cloud-based environment, you can immediately think about 100 or even more value-bringing business processes, which is to the benefit of the consumers, which is to the benefit of the pharmaceuticals, which is of the benefit to the doctors, and so on and so forth. So because you are now immediately receiving a picture of how this flu is spreading, and it can be driven again by the consumers, it can be driven by the doctors, you simply just have to enter, I feel unhealthy, I think I have a flu, press the button, send it to the cloud, and that's all. And we are in discussion here right now with the pharmaceuticals, of course, we are in discussion with doctors and other entities, and there's also the idea to roll out a pilot very soon. Very simple application, but it's driven by big data, by a big amount of data. So now I have to be a bit more, it's not deep dive technology, but now I have to explain to you why is it now, especially what I'm talking about, a huge challenge for SAP. If you take SAP today, then SAP today is coming from the green area. The green area means we just have very few solutions today on the market, but with a high magnitude, with a high amount of users. Take our ERP solution, take our CRM solution, even our business analytics. It's driven by just a few applications, but a huge amount of users. And we are pretty successful with this kind of strategy. But everything what I described right now are complete new business scenarios. They're driven by apps, they're driven by connecting with sensors, with technology, whatsoever. So we are immediately entering now the blue area. So what we now have to do, we have to deliver more applications, but with less amount of users. Not every of the solutions here is relevant. I just gave you a few examples to that many people compared to the green area. So we have now to come up with a technology which allows us, especially SAP, to build solutions which even scale in the blue area. So this means we have to think about new models, how we develop our solutions, we have to think about new platforms, and so on and so forth. And that's something what we call the business web. And the idea is quite simple from this. It's just high-level technology. We are thinking about a cloud-based solution. We have a cloud. The cloud is mobile-driven, or is connectivity to mobile devices. It brings together the consumers, the business, even the machines, the sensors, the networks, and all the applications I was talking about, you finally can deploy out of this cloud environment. So that's the main idea. And of course, in certain areas, then you require something like a private cloud. So again, go back to the health area. There's of course applications where it's maybe personalized data in the cloud, and then of course we would require something like a private cloud. So we have to think about a new environment, and this is not yet there. So this is simply new for SAP to think about a pure cloud-based driven application, mobile-empowered application area. So, and now I give you even more examples, which are now close to be released. Which are now part or built already on this cloud-based solution. Just to outline so that We are doing this kind of research in a very pragmatic way. Number one example is precision retailing. That's probably something you heard about in different flavors. The idea is here also very simple. How do you bring together the consumers with the business, and in this context with retail? So the retailer is highly interested about better understanding the consumer demands. On the other side, the consumer requires that the retailer is making more notice or is treating the customer better than before. So what we need an engine, and the engine is data-driven, and the engine brings together the consumer with the business. And based on that, there's different scenarios, and that's something what we build here based on this cloud-based business web solution. So consumer and business are then together in the cloud-based solution. The second example, it's already a bit more disruptive, which is called smart asset tracking. And again, it's the same technology, it's the same platform, just different applications. And here the scenario is driven by ice cream. And that's also real. This is not a fake scenario or just a dummy scenario. This is under implementation right now. One of the biggest consumer of ice cream in the world is Finland. But what's the problem about Finland? It simply doesn't make sense to sell ice cream in Finland over the whole year, because it's pretty cold in the wintertime, and it's simply not possible to sell ice cream in the wintertime. So there's just a window of opportunity which is about 2 months where you can sell ice cream. But during the 2 months they are consuming ice cream, I would say, like hell. Yeah, they always eat ice cream, and they eat ice cream. Yeah, so it's like lunch. So it's a pretty interesting area from the business perspective, but the window is just 2 months. So what's the consequence from the business perspective? It doesn't make sense to install this kind of fridges everywhere in Finland for the whole period of the year, because 10 months it is simply unused, or you simply can't do anything, because there's no ice cream consumption then in December or January or the other winter months, even in springtime. So the model has to be more disruptive. So you have now to interpret this kind of ice cream box as a service. So now the logical step is not to say anymore this is a box or a fridge for ice cream. Now you have to call it a service, and the service is ice cream. The service is called ice cream. You provide a service, an ice cream service now to Finland. And then of course there's a provider or logistics company and so on and so forth, who is bringing then this kind of ice cream box to Finland to install it and to take it back. But it's a service now. The service is now you deliver now ice cream to Finland in the months, for example, June and July. So it's a complete new business model. It needs new business processes, and it has to be completely censored and connected. Because the service, if you sell now ice cream, or if you sell now the service ice cream, then you have to make sure that there's always ice cream in the box. Yeah? So because you sell the service ice cream, and not anymore ice cream separated from the box, separated from something else. So you have to have you need connectivity to the box. You have to understand what's in the box, what is the most consumed ice cream, and by when do I have to refill the box because Magnum or whatever you take is empty, is not there anymore. So now the box is censored, is completely censored, is part now of the network. Now we have not just the box anymore isolated, we have the machine-to-machine connectivity to the platform. We have the new business processes, and there's even more. And this is just one example. What we learned, and this is also was in pilot, is we learned that when users or consumers are going to the box, they open first the right door of the box, not the left one. So there's a majority of users, doesn't matter if it is a left-hand person or right-hand person, majority of the people are opening first the right the right side of the box. So what's the consequence from the business perspective? Quite simple. The most expensive ice cream is placed on the right side. And it's finally bringing more revenue to the retailer, to whoever is responsible for this kind of business. Just this kind of censoring delivers this kind of information. And then there is mapping and geo information necessary as well. Next example, smart logistics. Even very simple scenario, but just with this kind of business web technology, you are able to solve it. Here the scenario is Hamburg Harbor. In Hamburg you have the problem, one of the largest harbors in the world, you have the problem that there's not enough space. So if you are driving with your truck to the harbor and you want to release your container or you want to hand over your container to the ship, then it's very important that this goes as smoothly as possible. That you don't park in the harbor, that you don't have to wait in the harbor because you simply block the harbor or the harbor space. So as more as you are able to be connected to the driver beforehand and take or combine it with an airplane. If an airplane is approaching Frankfurt Airport, as more as you are able now to track the car and to advise the car, so now it's time to enter the harbor area, as better this is for the business, as better it is for the consumer, as better it is for the harbor owner, and so on and so forth. So we just have to connect now real time the driver with the harbor, with the ship, and whatever plays a role in this kind of context. You need a lot of censoring again, you need a lot of onboard units, things like that, a lot of technology. I don't want to stress this, and you need this kind of new business application. So what's again here this kind of learning? Here's another learning. Because what we figured out is, let's assume now the driver is now approaching Hamburg Harbor, and there's still 3 hours. He's too early for whatever reason, or the harbor is not yet ready. So now he has 3 hours. So now the question is, what are we doing with the truck driver? And then there was one enterprise who came immediately up with the idea, okay, provide me with the data. If I'm receiving the data, I make real-time an offer to the truck driver to go to the restaurant, to visit my restaurant. So what they are doing is they create a new business and they help the truck driver to make him even more happy because they make him a special order on the fly when he's approaching Hamburg Harbor, that the schnitzel, for example, is now 20% cheaper if he's going to this restaurant or to that restaurant. Real-time business, driven by data, driven by connectivity. And the last example, this is now in the area of emerging economies. Here the problem is the kind of scalability. Here we have to provide solutions which are extremely low cost because there's still not enough business power on the people living in those areas, and in this case in Africa. And I want to explain this with something like a spaza shop. This is one of many examples. A spaza shop owner is a single shop owner in Africa, South Africa, who is selling fruits, for example, or beer or water or whatever. But it's just a single person, and this person has to manage his own the whole shop, and the shop is in a rural area. It's not close to a city or something like this, so he's really outside of a city. And the idea came up now just to empower this person by allowing him to run the whole shop on a mobile device. This is something what we call business in your pocket. So the mobile device finally represents the whole business. Everything what he requires to run the shop, to order the goods, to charge, to manage the stocks, to refill, to reorder, and so on and so forth. Everything is business applications who are running on the mobile device. So it's something like an Apple store for business applications, again driven out of the so-called business web cloud. And we also use this. And the question I'm always receiving in this context is, what's about connectivity? Isn't there a challenge regarding connectivity? And the interesting thing is, connectivity is there. So even if you go into poor areas, very poor areas, connectivity is there. But there was simply nobody who was able to provide an integrated solution for such a spaza shop owner. Yeah? So that's another example how we can build disruptive solutions even for this kind of spaza shop owners. So let me conclude. What I have shown to you is just examples, but just examples. The examples fine, we are driven by technology. I was not focusing on technology, I was more focusing on this kind of disruptive business processes. But the disruptive business processes, where I gave you examples, they require a new technology. And this is different technology. It's driven by cloud, it's driven by mobile, but it's highly integrated. The very important thing I want to mention is this is not a game SAP only can play. So this is the area is simply too huge. What I have shown is research activities, is prototypes, is first solutions. But the main idea, of course, behind the concept is that others are contributing to this business web vision as well. We need connectivity, we need additional applications where we simply don't have this kind of subject matter expertise, and so on and so forth. So this is not an SAP only game. So SAP understands this as an open platform where others can contribute. And then it brings really together the areas where I briefly mentioned, even it's logistics or health and so on and so forth. And the consequence is it's going now towards the consumers. That's the biggest difference now for SAP. As I mentioned at the beginning, SAP is coming from the business, from the enterprises, but now we are in the middle of the consumer game. Thank you very much for your